Happy Monday. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Happy Monday. Welcome, Tevye.
Happy Monday. Doing great.
Happy Monday, or Monday evening where you are actually. So,
Yeah, it's Monday starts to get over. It's 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. now in Helsinki.
but is it still really light outside?
Well, yeah. No, it's quite light, but it's not. It's getting dark after I'd say 9 p.m. or something like that. So it's not anymore nightless night.
Hmm, that's pretty cool. Awesome. I guess for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, my name is Tevje Olin. I'm from Finland, from Agile Data Engine. Uh, I've been around data business about 14 years. I actually met a colleague today, and she told me that they're kind of driving down or closing data vault implementation. I was kind of starting my career in data business about 14 years ago. So that's something about resilience or in data warehousing. And they're doing it because the reasons are that the peoples have kind of turned around, changed, and so forth, and now they don't understand data vault, and that's the only reason they are closing it down. That's a pity, but yeah. So I've been around in data business around 14 years, and from kind of a CS background, but from traditional data warehousing and BI development to maybe about 10 years in cloud data platforms as a data architect, data engineer, something like that. And from Agile Data Engine, it was founded 2016 by Harri Kallio and Pasi Jalonen, and I've been around there from the beginning, but jumped on full day a couple of years back.
Yeah, so we met at the Agile Data Engine Summit last year in Helsinki. So it's a fun event. Nice spot. So cool tool and all that fun stuff. I do have a question back to that Data Vault teardown. Now, what's replacing Data Vault?
Uh, what I heard, it's something to do with DBT and some other stuff, but probably some sort of a medallion architecture. But
Hmm.
I don't know about more than that. I only
Right.
know that it's going to be teared down for no obvious reasons. Well, maybe it's. I think the original project was done with Informatica and SQL Server, so might be
Mm.
that it's getting a bit outdated. But the data vault still works.
But they just kind of ripped out the data model too when they went to a new cloud data platform, maybe.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know about that more than that.
Seems
But
to happen a
I
lot
just
though.
heard about it today.
Yeah, it's common. I think you kind of rip out the data model along with everything else because yeah, that's something we could talk about. Actually, I'm curious about your thoughts. So you're big into data vault, big into data modeling. Um, what are your thoughts on the current state of data modeling today?
Well, one thing is, of course, there's a lot of kind of quick and dirty solutions nowadays that you just bring in the data and publish it somewhere, and that's kind of acceptable depending on the use case and if it's kind of a conscious decision. But then again, there's kind of if you think about data modeling, there's around 160 zettabytes of data produced this year alone. And data has been kind of a sort of wild west without any regulations and so forth. But now there begins to come more and more regulation, at least in Europe, on the data stuff like GDPR, and then there's the DORA regulation, digital operational resilience act, or something like that on the financial sector. That said, I would say that the data modeling will become that the regulation will kind of I would say that it's gonna there's gonna be more regulations on the data stuff. And when there's more regulations, you need to understand what kind of data you're processing and storing and whatnot. And if you don't have the correct kind of data modeling in place, it's going to be much more difficult to kind of manage that.
I mean, even really basic things, right? Like your ability to delete or update data is dramatically affected by the data model you use. I'm sure you're going to talk a lot about that in your book, Joe. But like, if it's a huge sprawl of data with no model, and you have the same data that gets shipped into like 50 different tables, how on earth are you going to track down people's private data and delete it if you get a GDPR deletion request without some kind of management?
3 letters, LLM.
That's
I'm kidding, but then you got to track down the vectors that you also used. But
that's not going to be enough from the regulation perspective.
No, not at all. No, that was definitely a joke. But yeah, it was interesting. When working on the data modeling part of the data engineering course, I threw out the term SQL Spaghetti Monster, and I think the others who were looking at this like, what is that? And I was like, well, it's kind of what you described, Matt, where it's just this endless, incomprehensible sprawl of code and data and Lord knows what else. And there's no lineage in place, so you have no idea what goes to what, and it's a mess. And I would say these are pretty common messes. But that's why you model data, so you can better reconcile things. And it's a crying shame, about the data vault example you gave earlier, because I mean that's it's made for a lot of things, being able to track your data, like when it came in and what it is and everything else. I mean, data vaults has a lot of rigor to it. So
yeah, I actually have to say that Dan Lindstedt has done a tremendous work on data industry and on the modeling side and on the methodological side as well on data vault. And well, it's out of the box kind of a auditability and then the pattern-based stuff and so forth. It brings automation on much higher level on the kind of data warehousing.
Yeah. So the topic of today is, what should data engineers focus on? And we can obviously talk about a bunch of other stuff, but what do you think data engineers should focus on today?
Well, that's quite a broad question. Of course, but if you think about it, the tools and technologies nowadays, they can change. If you go 5 years from now, I don't know if you can see, probably some technologies will stick, but some will be completely different and so forth. But the kind of underlying principles and fundamentals will be, I would say, the same. So in that sense, I would say SQL is definitely one thing, data modeling, and maybe the most important one is skill is the communicational skills, because whatever you do, if you can't communicate it well, it won't kind of fill up the correct requests or whatnot. And probably the kind of, even if you're able to communicate kind of clearly and getting the requirements on the first place, probability is that the customers who made the requirements, they don't know what they needed in the first place. So you need to iterate, and it's going to be kind of a fast-paced iteration, I would say.
Yeah, it's tough too, because I mean, I think that's one area where we really need more training in this industry. I think quite often people who start out in the analytics role just get kind of used to taking instructions, build me this report, build me that report. But to be a really good data engineer, you have to be able to project manage both the technical side of the world and sort of project manage the business too, and say, okay, what do you really want that you don't know how to communicate with me? Like, what can we accomplish together that you haven't thought of in terms of what's possible with data? And that is a tricky kind of training to deliver, frankly, that really crosses those boundaries.
Yeah, then there are, of course, I would say that one focus area, at least on kind of a public cloud era, who knows if public cloud even exists in 5 years or 10 years. Probably it will, but you never know. But you just understand the kind of a cost structure, how it's built in cloud, and what kind of queries are you executing, how are you computing, and how do you parallelize stuff, and what kind of queries parallelize well, and what kind of queries are run in sequence. Because if you don't know that stuff, then you're probably running kind of just scaling up the compute and cost instead of getting any kind of a leverage on the query performance.
What do you think about that, Matt? Do you think the public cloud will exist in 5 years, or do you think that there will be trends that might change that? I mean, because the trend right now is, at least in America, is public clouds. It's growing for sure. It's not growing at the clip it was, and it's also, surprisingly enough, not the majority of the workloads. I think most is still on-prem from what I've seen. But what do you think? What do you think happens?
I definitely think it's going to exist. I'm kind of curious what trends. There's probably some trend in workloads and compute that's going to be really big in 5 years that we just haven't quite predicted yet, right? I mean, you've talked about maybe a more distributed notion of cloud that ships workloads across individual machines or something like this. Maybe small data. I think small data, like the kind of DuckDB approach, has really grown, and maybe in 5 years that will be absolutely huge. Maybe with the cloud backend, but a lot more of the compute done locally on laptops or something like that.
I think that is a trend. Like, I was talking with Jordan Tigani last week about that, and it seems like there's a lot of advantages to doing something like, say, DuckDB locally, especially if it's like what MotherDuck's doing. I think is one potential way of the future, where you distribute your workload between, say, a WASM-based analytical processing and cloud for big workloads.
Yeah, and definitely that opens up more kind of possibilities, because there are some workloads you can't run in public cloud. So
yeah, were you talking like highly regulated ones, or what kind of workloads?
Yeah, definitely, right, highly regulated ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I think people are becoming more cost conscious. Not a surprise, but when people start seeing their cloud bills pop up, like I was talking to a friend of mine at one of the big cloud vendors, I won't say which, but this person had set a customer up with a key to make the query run more efficiently and wouldn't have to look up like data in a full table scan. Well, this particular customer decided, oh, let's ignore that key and get rid of it. And then they got like an $85,000 bill for their cloud data platform, where it normally was not anywhere near that much. And so then they went back to my friend and asked what happened. And he's like, oh yeah, that key that I told you to use, you didn't do that. So
yeah, I used to work as a kind of data warehouse consultant, and we did this kind of a cloud analysis of their kind of suitability for their environments, and I was suggesting that use kind of a standard ROST or SQL database instead of the kind of a columnar data analytics database, because they had kind of data like, I don't know, 5 gigabytes or less, so it was like less than my laptop memory. But they still went on the columnar database, and they ended up kind of thinking that, why are we paying bills like 20,000 euros per month for this database?
Whoa, wow. For that scale of data, I can't imagine what queries they were throwing at that thing. Although what I've seen, even with traditional on-prem systems, is that quite often most of your load is just analysts running the same query over and over and over again, even when the data hasn't changed. So maybe it was something like that.
But not caching it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You need to understand kind of even with the certain cloud database technologies, you're going to have these kind of caches that when you requery the same query again, it doesn't cost anything if nothing has changed. But then again, if you use, for example, certain kind of data types, arrays or whatever, it doesn't hit the cache. So you need to know what you're doing. You need to understand the differences between the columnar and row store indexes and so forth.
Well, yeah, and this is what, on the topic of what your data engineers focus on, I think this is definitely one of those things, like know your tools and know not just the tool itself, but fundamentally how does a tool operate behind the scenes, right? You mentioned columnar storage. Like, why would you want to use that? is that a good fit for that size of data? You were saying, was it how many gigs was that? Like five?
Five.
Geez, $20,000.
Something like that.
What the hell happened?
No, I think it was 20,000 euros. But it was
Euros?
More or less the
more
same
than
thing.
dollars.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was even more. But yeah.
Yes, that's crazy.
But another thing is, of course, that I think data engineers focus on statistics and kind of a set theory and algorithms, basically that kind of stuff, and understand the kind of fundamentals and the differences between the data work and kind of a traditional software development.
Why would that be important? I'm playing devil's advocate, but
well, if you think about it, it's not just kind of a code to be deployed in one environment, but if you have when you're building a data platform, you're probably doing some integration from several different source systems, and you might end up with huge tables like let's say 10 billion records or whatnot. Then if you do some change to that table and you're loading it from several sources, what happens if you just go there and change the data type of a field? It's not going to end up kind of pretty. So you need to understand kind of that it's the data has the state, and you need to be kind of able to figure out how to kind of it's continuously changing and ever flowing thing. So I would say that's the major difference. Of course, then there's the difference that it's always kind of a downstream development from business applications or wherever are you extracting the data. That means that you need to be able to communicate to two different directions. You don't need to communicate just to the customer end or the kind of a business who needs the analytics and whatnot, but you need to be able to communicate also to the business application side and how to extract the data and how to get the data and whatnot. And then there's the kind of a cross pressure that the business expects you to kind of fix up their data quality issues when it should be kind of upstream, because the more downstream you go in the data quality issues fixing, you can do that in data warehouse as well, but it's going to be much more expensive than doing it in where the data originates from.
So Joe and I talk about this all the time, and I think most data engineers do, which is just exactly what you said. Data engineering is treated as downstream from applications. Is there any hope for us to improve that relationship and to communicate better upstream so the data engineers have a say in how the data is produced? Or are we just delusional?
I would say that's more like a management problem and kind of a organizational problem and how to kind of organize stuff within the kind of a company or where you're working for. So it's not kind of a individual data engineer's way of working or solvable problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is definitely company dependent, for example, right? Like, I mean, it is interesting. Europe is an interesting beast too. I feel like the companies there, they're surprisingly, they're different than the ones in America. They operate at a different speed. They have a different I think, approach to work-life balance, culture, engineering, et cetera, et cetera. I do tend to think my generality, my stereotype is I think European companies tend to be a lot more thorough and thoughtful about their data practices. Like they have a lot more. I just noticed there's more of a tendency to think about the problem versus in America, everything moves really fast. So it's just like, screw it, throw a bunch of compute at it. We just need to get like this sprint done like now. So everything is just, I think, a bit more. We definitely move faster here, but I think the amounts of technical carnage left behind is maybe a bit higher. But that could be also, I could be wrong at the same time. Yeah, but as I read an article the other day in the Financial Times where like Lidl, the big grocery chain, they're getting into cloud compute now.
Yeah,
they're selling cloud services, which is pretty fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like,
so that's wild. I saw that article, but I haven't read it yet. So basically, what's the gist? Did they create an internal cloud and then it was so good that they started selling it to everyone?
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I have to ask some friends that work at Lidl about that, because it sounds like they didn't expect that to happen. but here we are. So
Yeah, they're actually they sell some good stuff and they're cheaper than their competitors. So maybe I don't know what happens on the cloud market.
oh yeah, when I'm in Europe, I
But
go to
that's
Lidl all the time when I'm there
yeah,
because it's like everything's like half the price of anywhere else. It's a great store. So
and definitely that's a welcome thing, at least in Europe, because well now the market is kind of a three big ones competing with each other. I would say that
oh yeah, you got the big three
market
American
needs
companies going in there and
yeah.
trying to clobber each other in Europe. It's funny when I speak at conferences, I see the vendors all there, and it's yeah, they're but it's interesting because it seems like the European cloud market is definitely slower to open up than the US, for example. Like um it's you talk to salespeople at these companies, and it's like yeah, there's just a bit more resistance. Like, I think people want to stay on the on-prem, for example. Looks like we have a bit of a loading issue here. Let me see
Are
here.
we not seeing comments? Hold on, let me pull up LinkedIn itself. Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing to me about the cloud situation is that on the one hand, you could argue that the American cloud companies have gotten ahead in technology. On the other hand, there's this first mover disadvantage too, and that is you end up locking into architecture patterns that are not ideal. AWS, for example, has been doing it pretty much longer than anyone, and some of their stuff feels a bit rusty now. And so if I'm a European cloud company, I can look at that and say, what could be better about AWS? What could be better about Google? And also, how can I comply with GDPR out of the box and make sure everyone's data is safe and secure and in the right location under the right political jurisdiction? So I will be very curious to see how this fight plays out. Maybe the European cloud companies, maybe we'll have Lidl in the United States sometime soon.
Yeah, there's actually I think there's already starting I wouldn't say trend, but you can see kind of a emerging situation where kind of companies are actually they've done their cloud migration and they're running stuff on public cloud, and now they're kind of you can see some companies moving from cloud vendor to another. Same thing with the kind of a cloud database platforms like from one to another and so forth. So there is movement between the ecosystems and between the vendors and so forth, and I think that's a good thing. And there's kind of hopefully icebergs and whatnot. The open stuff will kind of make that more easy.
I'm just going to post the YouTube link here. It's good we have a backup. I can't seem to get back onto LinkedIn for some reason. And
oh, that's weird. You mean at
yeah.
all? You can't get on LinkedIn? I can see the comments. Maybe if I see anything good here, I can.
Yeah, like I can't. It says we're live in StreamYard, but when I go to our show, I can't see it.
Oh, that's odd.
I just don't understand what's happening.
Very strange.
There we're back. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So to your point, Tevye, I mean, I think one of the big things about cloud is that I think it's still true on AWS. It's mostly what's called infrastructure as a service. That's the main thing that they end up selling. So they have all these services, but it's really like fundamental, raw EC2 that they're selling and S3 storage. And increasingly, I think for the newer cloud vendors, there's been a shift in focus to platform as a service, meaning higher level services so that you don't have to deal with individual virtual machines. I
think AWS is also selling quite a lot of services.
Yeah.
If you think about it, they've got
like Kinesis,
serverless computing, and Redshift and whatnot. So it's not just about infrastructure as a service. And I would say that the major kind of a fundamental value that the cloud services provide nowadays is not the kind of infrastructure. It's more about the kind of services they can give you, which are easily adaptable.
Yeah. So I just posted for the audience. I posted an alternate YouTube link in case LinkedIn somehow dies. Let me see here. We got some questions, and sorry, these aren't coming through in the comments here. I love StreamYard some days. I'm joking.
Or who knows? It could be StreamYard. It could be LinkedIn.
Could be LinkedIn. Could be.
Maybe it's Monday morning for StreamYard and LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, it might be. Let me see. Shelley Warren asks, "What are the top rules / privacy concerns you focus on when recommending a cloud service to a client? I can repeat the question if you like. What are the top rules and privacy concerns you focus on when recommending a cloud service to a client? There you go.
Well, that's a quite broad question, but I don't know. You need to kind of take into account kind of if you think about it, the cloud, which kind of cloud service you are utilizing. There's a lot of things depending on the kind of level the cloud service is provided. If you're running something on IaaS or infrastructure as a service, you maintain your own software there, and then again on PaaS services, there's a little less kind of that stuff. And of course, and on the database side, if you think about the analytical databases, there must be a kind of a data security and crypting and kind of a data at rest and data.
Yeah.
So there's so many different kind of considerations that I would say that the less the kind of a data moves through public internet, the better it is.
Yeah, definitely. I would say like all the clouds have really robust security when you're talking about VPCs and network rules and all that stuff, IAM permissions and so forth. Where I mean, the Snowflake debacle, right? Where people didn't have MFA turned on. Like, I think that's more of what I'd be concerned about, is just making sure people have the basics covered.
That's kind of a more company problem.
That's not a cloud thing. I mean, it's just like turn on multi-factor authentication, like that. Don't do stupid things. I mean, if you look at where the points of entry are into cloud, though, it's like it's usually the user, not the cloud.
Well, same thing in the kind of a. If you think about if somebody comes to your company and premises and steals something, it's probably that most likely that someone opened the door for the kind of a thief who works in the company, just kind of because there was someone behind the door.
Mm-hmm.
But the vendors have a big incentive to make sure that users behave, because, I mean, obviously we saw, even if it wasn't directly Snowflake's fault, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it became their problem very quickly, right? If a breach happens on your platform, it really doesn't matter to the stock markets if your company is responsible or not. If it was some other company's user that caused it, you're still the fingers are going to point at you. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I had somebody from Snowflake comment on something I commented on. I said that I used Snowflake security breach. Like, we weren't breached. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, your CEO just got hauled before the Senate pretty soon, so maybe he can explain what happened. Right? Like, you can nitpick whatever security breach means, but in the eye of the public, you had a security breach. Yeah. Something happened, and that's how it is. And then, the Senate wouldn't be sending a letter to the CEO of Snowflake if that wasn't the case. Like, it was because of the AT&T hack.
Yeah, and it's like someone once told me that it isn't how it actually works or the stuff goes on, but it's actually kind of the appearance, how it appears to be, is kind of on that level at least more important than what actually happened.
Oh yeah. And it's, I mean, nothing against Snowflake, but I mean, their stock price is going down, and just stuff like this doesn't help the situation. So it's like, I'm hopefully they hopefully they can fix it. I mean, I met the CEO of Snowflake, seems like a cool guy, and I use it all the time. So it's nothing against them, but it's just a perception of an issue is that's the optics are very bad, and again, that wasn't caused by anything as far as we can tell, as far as the news says, anything infrastructure wise. It was simply people didn't have simple password protection and credential protection on, and that's how a lot of things get breached. It's fascinating. Sorry, I got a question here. This guy's asked this question twice. Jacobo Wamani asked, is the need for data engineers growing or shrinking? And he specifies not data engineering itself, but data engineers, the people.
That's actually a good question, because, there is the curse word, Gen AI, which kind of I've said that there's going to be kind of a co-pilots and stuff like that will help the data engineers to do their job more effectively, but and productively. But then again, like I said, like there's like 160 zettabytes data created alone this year, and that means that there's going to be because of the kind of we're living the time of Gen AI. There's going to be more and more kind of how do you say it, a background noise in the data. So someone's job is going to be filtering out all the irrelevant data and focusing on the kind of data that has some sort of value or whatnot. But yeah, so in that sense, I would say that there's going to be more need for qualified data engineers in the future.
So, what do you think, Matt?
I think
you wrote a book on data engineering.
Yes. I mean, my thought right now as I think about this is let's think about what happened in other industries. So, for example, commercial aircraft used to have flight engineers. So they had actually 3 pilots, and one of them would just manage all the systems in the plane. And then starting in the 1960s, the flight engineers slowly went away. By the 1980s, no new planes had flight engineers. But overall, we still have more pilots, and that's because aviation itself has just grown and grown. And I think it's a similar situation where we'll be able to do things faster using various tools, but the uses of data, so it's sort of paradoxical. Gen AI also drives more use of data, which is going to scale up the data profession, even as our ability to deploy things improves. And in principle, to do the same thing, you need fewer data engineers. That's kind of my thought off the top of my head. On the other hand, maybe we'll all be out of work and enslaved by the artificial intelligence in a decade. I'm not sure.
Yeah. One aspect is, of course, is that if you think about the amounts of data and computing that will be kind of it's ever-growing stuff. It's kind of the energy consumption will be tremendous as well. So I don't know, maybe at some point we just need a kind of whole generation of data engineers to focus on optimizing the workloads.
Nuclear engineers.
Yeah. well, that's the other option.
Yeah, I know. Like, there's a new nuclear power plant being built over, 2.5 hours east of us, northeast in Kemmerer, Wyoming. So they have a coal plant there right now. They're shutting down. They're going to open up it's actually Bill Gates's new nuclear reactor idea. So they're going to test it out there. There's nothing out there to destroy. So I mean, if it goes off, it's just like, okay, nothing.
Yeah, we just
can't get to my cabin. That's about it.
Kind of the most our new nuclear power plant opened in Finland. Was it this year or last year? But anyway, the building of the nuclear power plant took something like, I don't know, 20 years or so.
Jeez.
It was delayed. Like it was more delayed than the average software project.
Yeah, but you're going to need something like that, I think, to power just on the scale of computation you're talking about. Like, I don't know if there's enough fossil fuels in the world, and you need sunlight for solar, obviously, but that's not everywhere in the world, especially where they have data centers. They tend to be in cold areas. Although we have a lot of data centers in Salt Lake City for some reason, and there's no water to cool these things. It's the damnedest thing, but tax breaks work wonders. But it's an interesting question. I think back to the question: is the need for data engineers growing? I think. So last week I gave a talk over at the University of Utah at their data engineering class. Matt, I think you should probably give the closing lecture there.
Yeah, I'll check in with Matt Peksock, who runs that class.
Yeah, it's fun. But I think the question mark really was, what's the job market like right now, right? And I think, I mean, it's interesting because I felt like, in some ways you feel like you're at an inflection point in not just this industry, but in a lot of industries. So I said, the need for juniors, I think, is going to, which this East class was. I was like, I think it's going to evolve for a lot of reasons, obviously due to current economic factors and as well as, new technological advances. So yeah, I just told him, the things you need to focus on really, no matter what, and no matter the economy, is build your network of people who can help you get the opportunities. that shotgunning 1,000 resumes out probably wouldn't get you, right? I think that's nice. The thing I urged this class to do was start looking for work now. I don't know what the demand is for data engineers, but you got to control what you could control. But I think I do agree with your point, Tevye, where it is. I think the need will grow. Data engineers sort of sit at the intersection between the source systems that generate data and the data that's required for machine learning, analytical, AI applications. So I don't see that going away. Will that be replaced at some point by some agentic data engineer robot? I can't tell you. I don't know. Maybe, or maybe it augments the current data engineers. Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time to be in the field, and by exciting, I also mean positive and negative ways of being excited. So,
what's the job market like in Finland right now? I think in the US, what we're seeing over here, what I've seen a lot, is that there are layoffs happening in Silicon Valley, and yet I constantly get requests from companies looking for people. And so it's not so much just the job market, it's the fact that the people looking for engineers are not connecting with the people getting laid off in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think in Finland, it has been slowing down, at least this year, maybe last year as well. But then again, it's not hopeless. It's quite okay, I would say. There's still kind of at least from personal experience, I can say that there's quite a lot of kind of going on. So
I don't know what it is about Helsinki and maybe more broadly Finland, but when I was there last year, it struck me the concentration of data talent in Helsinki, for example, was unreal. Like, I think for a city of its size, I was really impressed by just the number of data people as well as the caliber of the data people. I was shocked, actually. Like, everyone seems really highly competent and good. And there were events every night I was there. It was the weirdest thing. Like, I went to Ole Bagno's talk at some data management thing. Then Auntie Ross took me to a R users group the following night. I can't remember what video game company it was, the biggest video game company in Helsinki, I guess, or Finland. But that was cool. That had a huge number of attendance. And obviously the Agile Data Engineering Summit, like that, had a lot of attendance and was great. And yeah, I think it had one of the strongest data communities I think I've seen on the planet, which to me was very surprising.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot going on in Finland on the data market, like in Nordics altogether. But I would say one specialty in Finland is that kind of because of our job regulations and whatnot, there's kind of companies tend to scale up and down their data projects with consultants, and the consultancies have kind of grown to offer complete projects, data projects, and then they have the incentive to kind of compete with each other and get kind of top quality data project. So I would say that probably has something to do with it. And of course, we have a good kind of educational facilities and universities teach computer science and whatnot.
That's interesting. Yeah, so there's Helsinki Data Week happening. You have an entire week. I think I mentioned to Auntie when I was walking around. We were walking back from a meetup, and I was like, "You guys should just make like a whole week of this thing. It's kind of interesting." It's then I guess that's exactly what happened. So
yeah, we're gonna be a part of the Helsinki Data
I would
Week.
hope you're going to be a part of that.
We have the Agile Data Engine Summit coming up on 30th of October.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I'll be there. So it'll be a lot of fun. And then Halloween's the next day, so I gotta dress up, find a costume to wear. So I'll dress up like a Viking or something. Got some questions here. Let me see. Persona asks, I'm gonna get to the second part of the question because we already covered the LLM part. For someone who's trying for jobs in the US, technology seemed to get pigeonholed for someone to practice tools. Imagine someone on AWS trying to apply for Azure. It gets tough to learn all the new services again from scratch. How do you deal with this? And I guess we can extend this to not just the US, but global. But how do you prevent yourself from getting pigeonholed, and how do you try and learn new services and technologies to stay ahead?
Well, I try not to. I try to get one level up from there, because the thing is, there's always there's so many new technologies and stuff that if you want to fill your CV with some technologies, be my guest. But I would say that's certain kind of a problem because it also well, there's the modern data stack. If you have kind of all the different technologies and everybody can choose their own technologies, you end up with a mess. Your architecture will become kind of unmanageable, unmaintainable, and of course, if it's a conscious decision that you start to create spaghetti architecture, then that's fine. Then you understand the consequences. But if that's not the case, then you'll end up with the mess, and then you'll end up into the situation where you're kind of when you try to hire someone, you kind of end up listing huge amount of different technologies for the applicants, and you're trying to look for a unicorn. Of course, if you meet up the unicorn requirements, then the salary is on the same level. But then again, why to concentrate on the technologies? Concentrate on kind of creating some sort of value out of the data. Concentrate transforming the data into some valuable insights and on kind of predictable timeline and so forth.
Yeah,
and I would say that that's more like a mathematical skills and kind of a mindset thing than certain technologies. If the technologies take too much time to adapt, then the technology is probably useless. Or within a couple of years, someone improves the technology so that you can use it. I think a good example from this is, let's say, Hadoop and HFSS. 10 years ago, everybody was like, we want to kind of be Hadoop engineers and whatnot.
Yeah.
How many people do you see on the job market nowadays who are Hadoop engineers? I would say there are some, but they're specialized in Hadoop, and you can still kind of if you think about it, there's all the cloud object storage are somehow based on some inventions that were kind of introduced by Hadoop or a distributed file system.
Oh yeah, I mean the amount of Hive Metastore out there is still large, but yeah, the need for that skill set, you're totally right. It's like, I mean, if you were to enter the job market today and your resume was Hadoop and Pig and Hive, I don't know what you could get a job at a legacy company or maintain that legacy infrastructure.
Yeah, there's definitely some kind of a niche companies that evolve around the technology, but they're not kind of the mainstream stuff. And to be honest, if your company is not kind of a data focused on data, if the data is something that you need for the business to evolve and so forth, then don't become a software company.
Yeah,
be kind of focused on your own business domain and leverage the data.
I mean, that's why, when Matt and I wrote Fundamentals of Data Engineering, we wrote it to be technology agnostic. Anytime we mentioned technology, it was simply to highlight, maybe a contemporary example of an idea. But the whole notion was you could replace different technologies within the data engineering lifecycle and not skip a beat, right? Because I don't think that lifecycle framework goes away, but the technologies change at warp speed. So I'd say, yeah, the advice to this question would be a master of the fundamentals. I was talking to Venkat Subramaniam last week. He's I consider him to be like the architect's architect, like easily one of the best in the world. And he was telling me he just spends his weekends just nerding out on technologies, and if something sticks, and he has to pursue it further for a client, maybe he'll just dive more into it, but at least he has that basis. But so the dude will learn like one new programming language a year, and preferably something that makes him really scared. He said Haskell was that language where he had to try and learn it like 3 times before he figured it out. Because it's just, I've been there too. I've tried to learn it twice. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm dumb. But maybe spend the weekends just toying around with new technologies. But but I'd say also get good at the ones where you're going to be using them for a job or more mainstream ones. I mean, for data engineering tools, DBT is very popular. You can go that route. get good at that. Spark's another one that's everywhere. I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. SQL is obviously more of a language that you can use. Like, if you can get good at that, you can be employable. Same with Python. That's the top language for data systems right now. But as far as tools go, I mean, there's so many right now. I can't even count them.
But I would say most of the tools you can kind of get on board quite quickly if you know SQL and Python.
Yeah.
And that's kind of enough. If you're not able to on board quickly enough, then there's probability that the tool will evolve or die away.
Well, and I also like your idea of focusing on fundamentals, because I can't count the number of times that I've basically seen people using Snowflake who don't know really what a columnar database is. And maybe they came from the traditional relational on-prem world and they took the time to like jump to Snowflake, which is great, but then they didn't learn the like architecture principles behind it. And that's what drives those €20,000 a month bills, right? Because you don't actually know how the tool works, and so you end up treating it like a transactional system.
Oh, we've seen some crazy stuff, Matt.
Yeah,
crazy stuff.
Yeah, so learn fundamentals, but then be open to new technologies at the same time, so that you don't get painted into a corner in your career, and you don't end up being the guy managing the mainframe in the basement for 30 years. Like you don't want to be in that spot.
I mean, you might want to be in that spot. Actually, it's a pretty sweet job. You're kind of indispensable. The technology is archaic that nobody's going to bother trying to learn it. Like if you wanted like that job,
perma job, basically.
The perma job. I mean, that's the best job ever. It'd be like, I'm going to be. I mean, I think Hadoop maintainer is the new COBOL engineer. So, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, COBOL engineers make a lot of money. So, like, I know one friend, they're migrating their Hadoop workloads to GCP, but like they're still going to have a Hive Metastore in GCS, Google Cloud Storage, because it's like all their data's in there, and to like ship that to a different file system is like, they ain't going to happen right now. So they, they're the only optimization really is they can use Metastore and BigQuery and get rid of some gnarly data proc jobs. But yeah, I mean, trying to extract yourself from that once you got into that, we've seen it. It's hard. Can be done though, for the right price.
Yeah, one thing of course is that if you think about the kind of a data engineering, it's not kind of, I would say that it's not individual sports, it's team sports. It's like you need to kind of have a good team composition to succeed, and you need to be having kind of a short feedback loop or whatever to get the kind of requirements right and correct the way where you kind of heading towards, and that's one thing. And then if you start applying kind of a good development practices and adopting, for example, DevOps from software development and put in the data ops. One thing is that if you've ever been working on a part of a productive software development team utilizing DevOps, you know that it's really kind of disciplined way of working and requires quite a lot of experience. You need to do kind of you need to lean up your development process as well, not just the kind of data pipelines. And you need to be able to kind of adapt to kind of situations where there's people coming in and going off from your team. So you need to be able to kind of, if you have the fundamentals in place and if you have correct tools and practices, then the onboarding and offboarding processes are not kind of disturbing your productivity too much.
Right. There's a lot of truth in that. Let's look at some questions here. Shelley Warren asks, I get lots of questions, concerns about betrayals of data usage. How do these LLM ChatGPT get data from businesses who use cloud services? Is it opt-in or scrap internet thing? I'm not sure what she wrote, but like, I guess the notion is, how's data getting into these LLMs?
I know that's really controversial with Adobe right now, basically, right? Like if you choose to use Adobe's cloud-based tools, then your data ends up training their models. So you use, Photoshop, your images end up training their models. And a lot of people are very unhappy about that.
I've heard some crazy stuff about like financial services companies who I'm not going to name, but like they're not supposed to put data into these large language models, but maybe an analyst might need to write a report and might throw in some files to make that report happen. I think this happens a lot, actually. So yeah, and again, these it's just like public ChatGPT. This is about a year ago. I heard this example, but I was like, damn. Yeah, I think I wrote in the comments, it feels like it's the Wild West. I think data is just getting shipped into these LLMs left and right, and like nobody's the wiser. So it just happens. But if you can summarize hundreds of pages or thousands of pages of stuff in a matter of like minutes, would you want to do that, or would you want to just read through everything the old-fashioned way? So I don't know. What do you think? What are you seeing with LLM activity over in Europe there, Tevye?
I think there's a lot of activity around that, and there's a lot of kind of content produced by LLMs, and definitely businesses are acquiring kind of using LLM on well, the ways used it, summarizing, for example, huge amounts of documentation. But then again, depending, and I would say that this is again something that will be regulated at some point. That okay, what kind of stuff you can kind of give for the LLMs and so forth, and the regulation will happen, and at some point there's more requirements and needs for I don't know, data analysts and whatnot to kind of check that what's okay and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of wild to me is that before like a year and a half ago, it felt like we were finally making progress on data quality, kind of data containment, having proper policies to contain people's private information, to contain sensitive business information. And then all of a sudden that sort of just got wiped away, just like you're saying, Joe, that people suddenly forgot all the rules and all the common sense that they had been learning over the last decade and just shoved data into LLMs with no guarantee that it wouldn't be used in ways that they didn't intend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens a lot, and I think I'll be curious to see what happens, like from like a regulatory standpoint, and just from a the U.S. is a bit different than Europe in the sense where like something catastrophic has to happen, data leakage or something, and then politicians might pay attention to it. But then of course that company will just get slapped on the wrist or high five behind the scenes or whatever, and they'll get. But nothing. The U.S. is weird where nothing seems to ever happen. The more grotesque the crime or the thing. I think in Europe, I think you do a far better job at regulating these sorts of things.
And maybe something like, well, if you're kind of I don't know, answering some kind of a, how to say it, if someone's buying something and you're answering their send you stuff that okay, we want to buy this kind of stuff, and you're replying that okay, we sell you this stuff for this price, and you just kind of there's a huge amount of documentation, and you get the kind of a brief of the documentation with LLM, and then you missell something for really cheap price because the LLM missed some kind of a highly important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Go on, Matt.
I was going to say that's very apt because we talk a lot about hallucination where LLMs make things up. But often you look at things like Gemini answers from Google, for example, and all the information it returns is technically correct, but it misses the big point. It misses some really key factor, just like you're saying. And so where it's going to totally misprice something because it gives you the correct data, but it just misses some really important aspect of the product you're buying. So for example, it like doesn't realize that the product you're buying is marked as defective or something like this. And so you buy a lot of 1,000 without realizing this for full price, without realizing that it's defective.
That might be a feature, not a bug, Matt. I gotta liquidate that bad inventory somehow anyway. So
it depends if you're the seller or the buyer, definitely.
Yeah. That's interesting. What are you excited about for data engineering, Tevye, over maybe the next year or two?
Excited. I would say, well, excited, but I would say that hopefully automation will increase, and it kind of makes the kind of a development of data much more productive and more consistent and robust, in the sense that it's not anymore kind of dependent as much on individual SQL skills or kind of a superhero culture and so forth.
Yeah, it's amazing the examples you still see of totally manual work in data flows, right? Like someone has to manually still copy something into a spreadsheet, even in 2024, before it goes into a database.
And let's say, not too kind of I'm a bit skeptical on everything, but maybe the open format kind of file and storage standards will make it kind of the competition and evolvement of kind of a processing technologies get higher and kind of.
Where are you skeptical?
I don't know. I'm just skeptical by nature.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, we've seen this before, right? Like supposedly open standards that turn out not to be so open, or yes, it's technically open source, but we'll sue you if you use it and we don't like the way you're using it. What do you think specifically about Iceberg? Do you think Iceberg is going to grow as an open standard, or is it going to get tightened up and more proprietary?
I don't know about the future, but I welcome it on the industry. It's a good thing. It's going to enable more transferability between different kind of cloud platforms and computing or database vendors and so forth. And it's generally a really good thing.
So I'm trying to answer some questions here. As a general rule, if you're going to ask questions in the chat, please make it specific and not broad. Thank you. Like this question's, what are the best practices for optimizing data pipelines in AWS for real-time data processing? I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, but I think it's a very broad question. So I don't know what optimization means in this case. Are you optimizing for time? Are you optimizing for latency, throughput? I mean, there's a number of things there, right? So I'd say be more specific in your questions. The second part of the question, though, is what can we do in AWS data engineer career to get success as USA and India? Yeah, ask better questions, please. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. Is real-time data popular over in Finland?
Define real time, but of
streaming
course,
data.
on streaming data, it is. Well, of course, it's present in, I would say, almost every data platform, but it's still kind of the majority of stuff runs on batches.
Mm-hmm.
And might be that, well, I would say that there's kind of combination of streaming and batches and everything coming into the same data platform, and there's different kind of use cases for different scenarios and so forth. But
yeah, same in the States, and so.
It just remains hard, right? We've seen these managed services come out. You have things like Kinesis on AWS or PubSub on Google, but it still seems to be hard to transition from batch thinking into streaming thinking. And there are just more things you have to think about. Like if you write some kind of a window, if you're processing a window, how much data is going to accumulate in memory, for example. You can bring down a cluster or drive your bills really high if you can't think about those issues correctly.
yeah,
So yeah,
kind of a real-time data is always more expensive than kind of a batch data. So if you don't really need the real time, if there's no requirements for the real time, then stick with the batches.
But I think it's getting simpler, though. I mean, I think in the next 5 years you'll see. I mean, my prediction is the tooling for streaming will be hopefully obfuscate a lot of the details and a lot of the just, simplify things, right? I mean, cloud data warehouses and the quote modern data stack used to be a really expensive hodgepodge of very expensive, clunky tools, and now it's for better or for worse accessible through a credit card, and you could spin everything up in about 10 minutes. Again, that doesn't mean that that's great. we already talked about some examples of where you can fall over with that, but the ability to do things easier will certainly be there, I think, with streaming. Whether or not people, I guess, capitalize on that in the best way possible remains to be seen. I think you'll always have a mixed bag. You'll have very expensive bills and people doing it right. So
Yeah, definitely. Now that the interest rates are declining again, maybe it's going to be the postmodern data stack.
we're back.
Okay. We're getting near the end here. One last question. If you were to choose one thing, just like one focus area to train data engineers on, what would it be?
One thing, communicational skills.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer. I agree.
Perfect. Well, it's good to see you. We'll see you in a couple months, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, literally a couple months. I think we'll be
Yeah.
hanging out there. So
October.
yeah, I really like that museum, that art installation that you showed me when we went there the last time. It was super cool. So hopefully there's something like that again. We walked around I don't even know how you would describe it. It was computer generated art installation. It was insanely cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I would love to check that out. Does some of it go way back to the 80s and 70s, or is it more contemporary?
It was more contemporary, I think.
Yeah, I'll show you some pictures, Matt.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe, but it was cool. I think we were just standing there, like our jaws dropped, looking at it. So it's cool. Awesome. For people who want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
From LinkedIn or agiledataengine.com.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Have a good one. Have a good night.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks to the audience. Yeah. Oh, by the way, next week I don't think we're doing a show because it's Labor Day here in the US. So there. But we'll be back on the 8th, I believe it is, with Gallup, actually. And then on the 16th, should I announce who we have, Matt, or should I keep it a secret for a bit?
Let's announce it. Maybe we can do a post on it in a week or something like that over Labor Day, something along.
I might post it this week, but yeah, you'll find out soon.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely a big name in the field. So awesome. All right. See y'all later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.